Hi, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well. This is the Canadian Foreign Policy Hour, critical look at Canada's role abroad. And I'm Eve Engler coming to you from Jojage, which has long been a meeting place of various First Nations, otherwise known as Montreal. And the Canadian Foreign Policy Hour is a critical look Canada's role abroad, and there's many developments again this week. So I guess I'll go right to it. Uh, I think there's a whole bunch of places that are seeing the effects of climate change. Um, Serious heat waves. Apparently in Death Valley in California, it was 54 degrees yesterday. There's big hurricane in the Caribbean, smashed Jamaica. Apparently the biggest one this early in the season. Of course, Canada is a leading per capita greenhouse gas emitter. And there's a piece in the Corporate Knights magazine that's a supplement in the Globe and Mail every month or every couple months that I was reading today. And it was all about countries in the global south that are extracting fossil fuels. And they quoted someone from Guyana who was being turned into sort of a petro state with ExxonMobil, which is a pretty fascinating dynamic going on there with the conflict with Venezuela. But they quoted a person from Guyana who says, if you want Guyana to leave its oil in the ground, you start leading by example. And of course, that is a very persuasive argument from a internationalist perspective. A country like Canada, if you go back 20 years when there was almost no extraction from the Alberta tar sands, it had universities, it had hospitals, it had infrastructure, and the tar sands oil was some of the most polluting. It should have all obviously been left in the ground. We knew that for greenhouse gas emissions, climate, and other, not just that, other ecological reasons, not to mention indigenous water systems and drinking and stuff like that. Port Chipewyan and others who were seriously harmed by the extraction process. Um, so that's something. Now, reading this Corporate Knights magazine, I don't know if people have ever read Corporate Knights. It just struck me there was a piece about the plastic summit that Canada held to have an agreement around reducing plastics and a whole bunch of articles. They're all sort of like from a kind of like ecological, little bit of like a good corporate uh, citizen kind of direction. It's amazing to read this stuff, and it's a full magazine, very well done, and there's nothing about capitalism, right? It's just amazing to just see like the fact that capitalism requires constant growth and expansion that's fundamental to the system, and so it's basically completely integrated with conspicuous consumption, which is of course not sustainable. You can't have 8 or 9 billion people on the planet all driving private automobiles, all consuming, disposable this and that. But that is just like completely left out, and it just kind of further reminded me, which it's not new, but how that is just completely left out of almost all environmental discussion. It's remarkable when you think about it. And I'm all for reform. I'm all for like less bad and I believe you got to do everything by steps and whatever. That's the preferable method of social change. But to not even mention the ways in which the economic system of capitalism generates conspicuous consumption, which to me is a very one-to-one kind of dynamic, is just a total comment on ecological discussion in this country. In the Hill Times, Bhagwant Sandhu, who's a regular on the Canadian foreign policy, has a good piece titled Haiti Needs Homegrown Bottom-Up Solutions, Not Top-Down Foreign Interference, which I agree with. This is, this is a long-standing issue, and we're just seeing more of it with this Kenyan foreign mission. Jeremy Appel, activist out in Edmonton, he posted, writer and activist, he posted that Michael Kovrig is actually threatening to sue Jacobin magazine and him personally for having made some mention that one of the Michaels that was detained in China was a spy, which I thought was kind of more or less confirmed in some of the reporting. But it's he's apparently being sued or threatened. There's a threatened suit against Jacobin and Jeremy over this matter. The Puglisi in the Ottawa Citizen has this piece titled "Retired General Advised Lobby Firm While at the Same Time Working for National Defense." So this former general, while he was dipping in both sides, he was advising the national defense and working for a lobbying firm. And once this came out, the military initially tried to defend it, and then they said this was wrong. And this is just an egregious example, but the whole revolving door, this is an element to the whole military, arms industry, Ottawa power politics that we don't discuss that much. The revolving door of former generals, top officials in the Canadian military going to work for lobbying firms where they get paid good salaries, working on behalf of different arms companies. That's a dynamic that explains somewhat of the military's focus on high-tech weaponry, which these companies obviously make lots of profits from. And so the top generals, they want this equipment partly because they want the equipment, but partly also because when they retire, they get to go work for these companies, and their former buddies are working for these companies. And it's a sort of lucrative affair for top military officials. And the whole role of sort of kind of quite formalized kind of corruption in arms procurement is a kind of under-discussed element, right? There's this whole network. These arms companies, it's all based upon lobbying and sort of political power that they get their contracts. So they're advertising on bus shelters around Parliament Hill. They're advertising on all the media outlets that are focused on D&D bureaucrats, and so it's a whole circle of kind of getting at public money by these arms companies, often using former military to do that. Somebody on X pointed out that the New York Times casually dropped U.S. intelligence assessment that Putin didn't want to expand conflict beyond Ukraine. So while they publicly say that if we negotiate an end to the war in Ukraine, it's going to lead to Putin having bigger appetite to then take on, take over Poland or Latvia or wherever else, Canada, or he's planning on taking over Guatemala next, or maybe it's Bolivia, I'm not sure. But they while saying this sort of publicly, we can't negotiate for this reason, now they're admitting, the New York Times just sort of said briefly, without kind of any comment on it, said, quote, "Throughout the war, U.S. officials have assessed that Prime Minister Vladimir Putin is loath to expand the war beyond Ukraine's borders. So we have to keep fighting because he's planning on taking all of Eastern Europe," is what they're saying publicly. But then privately, the intelligence assessment is saying that's not true whatsoever, which is, I think, a more correct analysis. So there's that's an element of the proxy war that I think is important to reveal and should be mentioned. U.S. bases have raised their level of alert. Their U.S. bases in Europe to the second highest level, apparently because of possible Russian sort of sabotage. That's probably propaganda, but maybe true. There's a story in today's Globe and Mail saying Tory voters more exposed to Russian propaganda, polling finds. And the Macdonald-Laurier Institute's disinformation project, which is led by Marcus Kolga, which it was all funded, the disinformation project, by the U.S. State Department, U.S. government funded the establishment of this. It's one of those examples of foreign interference in Canada that we don't hear much about. They are claiming that the supporters of the Conservative Party are more willing to believe Russian propaganda, as they put it. Now, when they define as Russian propaganda, of course, includes things that are simply, parts of the story or truth, if you like, around NATO expansion and how that contributed to the conflict. There's varying degrees of truth in it. The question of corruption. If you take it at the most maximalist, obviously not all weapons that are being sent to Ukraine are going into black market and enriching some, politician or military official. But some of that is happening. There is a corruption issue within Ukraine. There is also an issue around neo-Nazis that is it depends on exactly how the degree of emphasis you put is both true and untrue. I think at its maximalist, it's often untrue, but it's also, there's important truths in there. So this is more of this kind of this disinformation kind of element of the dangers of how, we have to protect our sending weapons and support for Ukraine under the assault of maybe this populist Pierre Poilievre. Quite frankly, it's a bad comment on the left to this type of analysis, that they say that NDP and liberal voters are less inclined, and it's like, again, it's this whole emphasis question. But the reality is, if there's NDP voters or liberals voters that have trust in NATO, that NATO is just trying to help Ukrainians out, they're just trying to help out, it's this sort of like defensive alliance and all that kind of stuff, that is a bigger piece of disinformation, or it's at least equal a level of disinformation than claims that there's, Nazis run or neo-Nazis run Ukraine or stuff like that. Because the reality is that NATO isn't just trying to help Ukrainians out. In today's globe, the NATO summit is beginning today in Washington, D.C. And in this big piece, right at the top of page 3, prominent piece, is about the pressure Canada's going to be under to increase military spending. We have to hit 2% of GDP because of NATO, but they'll never say, well, why don't we just, okay, fine, if that's the alliance's rules, let's just get out of the alliance, right? That's never part of the discussion. In this piece, there's this sort of like propaganda throw in the Globe piece that just refers to the long-running defensive alliance, right? That's how they refer to NATO, the long-running defensive alliance. There's absolutely no reason for the Globe and Mail journalist, who's supposed to be not, National Post or Toronto Sun or what, Post Media type person, a bit more sophisticated, kind of real world kind of journalist. There's absolutely no reason to just throw in defensive alliance. They could throw in the alliance claims to be a defensive alliance. They cannot, in any degree of objectivity or factually based analysis, referred to as a defensive alliance. It has clearly been a belligerent, aggressive alliance, and it has never gone to war to defend a member, right? That just hasn't happened. So this notion of a defensive alliance is ridiculous. Look at Libya, look at Afghanistan, look at former Yugoslavia. Now, there's people who believe, even on the left, that it was sort of set up in reaction to the Soviet Union. And I don't agree with that assessment, okay, of NATO. And maybe everyone who's on this call or on this Zoom or listen to it on YouTube after has already heard me make this point, but I'm going to make it again, because even among left-wing, self-identified anti-imperialist kind of peace kind of people, there's still this kind of idea that NATO was set up somehow just sort of in reaction to the Soviet Union and whatnot. It wasn't. The Canadian government and the public officials, specifically Lester Pearson, was very open about this at the time. And they stated this in the House of Commons. There was 2 reasons to set up NATO. One, to defend, one, to blunt the rise of the radical left, the communist, anti-capitalist forces within Western Europe, indigenous Western Europe, right? In Italy, the communists would have won the election after World War II. In France, they got 30% of the vote. They had multiple ministers in the government. In Greece, same thing. There was a notion that obviously all the sort of established order, the capitalist class, the church had all supported the fascist forces during World War II. So they were very much discredited after the war. And there was a notion that communism was a sort of wave of the future. And even among elites in those countries, that kind of sentiment prevailed. And so the point of NATO, in part, was to bolster the basically the capitalist forces, the established order forces within NATO countries, and Canada would dispatch tens of thousands of Canadians and US, North American troops to Western Europe to have stationed there to ensure that there was no socialist revolution within those countries. And Lester Pearson, in March of 1949, when discussing NATO in the House of Commons, he explained this, and he other comments, which I quote in my Lester Pearson book, you can find, that go in the same direction. But this is the best one, and I've quoted it many times, but it's one of the best quotes I came across. And I had to say, the way I came across this was by the old school method of going to the Concordia Library, getting every single Hansard book of the parliamentary debates, and I looked through every single year when Pearson was foreign minister and then prime minister, and I read through all of them. So I had to search, like, this was a lot of work to get these different quotes from Pearson in Hansard, and some of them were just stunningly revealing. But this is what he said. The power of the communists, wherever that power flourishes, depends upon their ability to suppress and destroy the free institutions that stand against them. They pick them off one by one: the political parties, the trade unions, the churches, the schools, the universities, the trade associations, even the sporting clubs and the kindergartens. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization is meant to be a declaration to the world that this kind of conquest from within will not in the future take place amongst us. So we have to send a bunch of North American troops to Western Europe because the communists are going to take over the kindergartens, right? That's the conquest from within that Pearson is referring to. The other part to the establishment of NATO was basically world domination. And Pearson, again, was open about this in the House of Commons. During the debate, he said, quote, "There is no better way of ensuring the security of the Pacific Ocean, not the North Atlantic, at this particular moment than by working out between the great democratic powers a security arrangement that the effects of which will be felt all over the world, including the Pacific area." And then he also said a couple years later about the Middle East is vital to the success of North Atlantic area. And then a couple years later, 53, further, there is now only a relatively small geographical gap between Southeast Asia and the area covered by the North Atlantic Treaty, which goes to the eastern boundaries of Turkey. That small area is about 5,000 kilometers, right? So we have to support French colonialism in Vietnam, American policy in Vietnam, because it's close to the NATO area, right? This was being stated openly. It wasn't hidden. And so what concretely in terms of NATO and colonialism, in the 1950s, Canada pumped in billions, today about 8 or 9 billion, 1.3 billion in NATO mutual assistance program weaponry to the European NATO powers as they suppressed independence movement in Algeria and Vietnam, the British, the French, that being the French, the British in Kenya, the Belgians in Congo, etc. And so from the Canadian government perspective, NATO was about reinforcing the colonial order, which had been weakened during World War II, but bringing it under the US-led geopolitical umbrella, right? That's how this was. And right from the get-go, arms deliveries, in this case, donations that Canada was giving to Europeans, was part of the whole, the arms industry was all part of NATO and stuff like that. So NATO has never been some sort of like defensive alliance. Obviously, since the demise of the Soviet Union, we've always seen it just more and more belligerence from NATO. So I think we have to put to rest this notion that there was ever some sort of legitimate element. 75 years later, NATO really should disappear, and Canada should, of course, withdraw. But instead, what we're going to hear in the next 72 hours or week or whatever it's going to be, we're going to hear like endless stream of Canada's not pulling its weight. We got to give more public resources to the arms industry. We got to give more public resources to the military. We got to do more in terms of, I just actually really kind of realizing, stunned, you see sort of builds up slowly, but the amount of homelessness, the amount of unhoused people that I'm seeing this summer in the eastern part of downtown where I live, right? There is a real, and I know it's all across the country. There is a real problem with and there's obviously many factors tied into it. It's not just about public housing, but having more public housing and putting social resources into public housing is a important element in dealing with what is a serious, increasingly serious social crisis in this country. So instead of putting all this money, 80 billion up front into these new naval vessels that can fire missiles 1,500 kilometers, let's put that money into building public housing. Now, on the whole question of Canada listing the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the Iranian part of the Iranian military, as a terrorist organization, which it did about 2 weeks ago. First of all, the Iranians are continuing to push back against it. The Iranian foreign minister was quoted in the story saying that he, quote, that Ottawa's decision, quote, took place in alliance with terrorists and Zionists. Now, Judy Sgro, who's a Liberal MP, I believe she used to be the immigration minister, maybe under Chrétien or something like that. Now she's just a backbencher, Liberal MP. She was quoted in this story that I saw yesterday, a couple of days ago, from the MEK, the Iranian sort of cultish, previously identified, labeled a terrorist organization because they supported Iraq during the Iran-Iraq war. She's a big proponent of the MEK and her leader, the MEK's leader. And she was in Paris for this MEK conference summit, or they call it Free Iran Summit 2024, about a week ago. And it's a speech, and in the speech that she gave, she's boasting about having helped get the IRGC listed as a terrorist organization in Canada. And she says that now they're going to try to get the European Union and the UK to follow suit. So Canada was following the US, I believe, is the only other country that's done that. I'm not sure. Maybe Israel has. I'm not sure. Now, so that's a part of it. This is like sort of the MEK, this like cultist group that has been working with Israel to assassinate Iranian officials and Iranian scientists in recent years. That's part of the forces pushing it. Also, obviously, Israel is part of the forces that have been pushing, and the Israeli ambassador celebrated Canada listing Iran, the IRGC, as a terrorist organization. So did the Israel lobby groups. So that's part of it. So part of this that we have to understand this is in the context of basically Canadian endorsement for Israel's Holocaust in Gaza, but also Canadian endorsement for ramping up of violence in the region. So, because part of why Canada, in their statement about listing the IRGC, they cite the fact that it had supported Hamas and Hezbollah. Well, if Hamas and Hezbollah right now are two of the main forces pushing back against Israel's violence and horrors, so targeting the IRGC because they're supporting those groups is obviously supporting Israel and giving a cue to Israel to ramp up in Lebanon, which seems to be happening. Also ramp up on Iran, and you've seen Canada's been doing that on many different fronts, from Yemen to supporting Israel's attack against Damascus, the Iranian embassy in Damascus. Now, Avigdor Lieberman, who was the former defense minister in Israel, now is a member of the Knesset, he the other day talked about that Israel should nuke Iran. Okay, so this is he's not in the cabinet of Netanyahu, but he's somebody who has got some standing within Israel, and he said it on TV, and then he said it on Twitter. So it's a little bit coded language he used, but it was quite clear what he was saying. Israel should think about nuking Iran. This is some of the context in which Canada is going to be, or has listed, the Iranian military. This is just emboldening Israel for more and more of its belligerence, its violence in Gaza, its towards Lebanon, against Iran, etc. Now, the Lancet Medical Journal reported or estimated that the death toll in Gaza is probably around 186,000 in terms of excess mortality. And basically, they have a formula that's been applied in many conflict zones, many different, is that it's usually like a kill ratio of like one person killed, and then there's like four other people. Well, they say it's actually from 3 to 15, usually. More people die because of other reasons. And I you know, this has been clear. I think I may have talked about it in previous sessions, that, you know, if you talk about millions of people being killed in the Congo from the late 90s to the early 2000s war, the vast majority of people weren't killed directly from bullets or from bombs, but from the consequences of the fighting of the war. You know, displacement, lack of food, lack of water, disease, lack of medical attention, etc. So the Lancet is saying conservatively that if based upon the 38,000 confirmed killed, that it's around 186,000 dead in Gaza, excess mortality. That may mean, you know, children dying at birth, or, you know, babies dying at birth, you know, older people who may have got medical care but didn't, you know, dying, you know. So, I mean, we don't know. This is, time will tell, and unlike maybe Eastern Congo, we probably will get something close to a close number of what happened, because there's, you know, a lot more attention devoted to Gaza. But any way you define it, it's just an absolute horror. Absolute horror. There's a whole new wave of displacement going on in Gaza. Now, Haaretz reported yesterday, maybe it was the day before yesterday, that basically that Israel killed tens, maybe hundreds of its own people on October 7th, and that the Hannibal Directive was employed, and it was employed multiple forums, multiple leaders, and early on in the day, that basically don't let any vehicles back into Gaza and blow up, kill everyone who's on those vehicles. That was basically the directive. I don't have a subscription to Haaretz, so I didn't actually read the full story, but reading reports on the story, that's what they say. That's what happened. We knew this, of course. This is just a confirmation, and I would say, you know, Mondo East, Electronic Intifada, Gray Zone have all reported this. Apparently, it's been reported in the Hebrew media for months. Now it's in English in Haaretz, and, you know, important paper. It's gotten sort of more official credibility. So that's an important point in all this. Now, Trudeau spoke with Israeli President Isaac Herzog a couple days ago. And Dmitry Lascaris did, I thought, a good summary of the readout, the statement. And this is what he said. Trudeau began the conversation by condemning Hamas's October 7th attacks, calling them brutal. But he employed no such language to describe Israel's monstrous attacks on Gaza, which have killed vastly more civilians than Hamas killed on October 7th. Trudeau demanded that Hamas release its Israel hostages, but said nothing of the far larger number of Palestinian hostages whom Israel holds in deplorable conditions amounting to torture. Trudeau condemned the quote, disturbing rise of anti-Semitism globally, but said nothing about rampant Islamophobia and anti-Palestinian racism in Israel and Canada. Trudeau noted that Hezbollah continues to bombard northern Israel, but said nothing of Israel's attacks on Lebanon, which have killed far more civilians than Hezbollah has killed. Trudeau reiterated Canada's supposed support for a two-state solution, but said nothing about Israel's ever-expanding illegal settlements, which are insurmountable obstacles to the two-state solution. Nor did Trudeau mention the Israeli political elite's total rejection of a Palestinian state. Trudeau concluded his pointless conversation with the Israeli war criminal by invoking the utterly discredited rules-based international order. Okay, the reason I read this all out is that even in statements, I'm not talking about actually doing things, like all the different ways Canada's, materially contributing to Israel's Holocaust in Gaza, but just at the level of rhetorical, the readout from the Prime Minister's office about a discussion, still, even at that level, it's totally Israel talking points, right? It's totally Israel talking points. Still 9 months in, no matter how, it's like, it doesn't matter how many Palestinians are killed, no matter how much starvation, doesn't matter how many destroyed water sources, doesn't matter how many destroyed buildings, destroyed agricultural land, etc., etc. It's still the structure of the whole thing. I bet you Trudeau has never referred to Israel's hostages. I mean, Israel has tens and tens of times more Palestinian hostages, and they're treating them worse. As we're seeing the stories come out, they're treating them worse than how the Hamas is treating the Israelis taken into Gaza, with much less resources to be able to provide food to people and the like. So it's just unbelievable. And you get into it. And so there was a story in the Maple, and this is also kind of jogged my memory about this. So the Maple published a story, said public safety saw no evidence linking Palestine rallies to Hamas call. From their outset, there was an attempt to conflate these protests with support for Hamas. So basically, early on, after October 7th, there was an effort to say all the protests happening in Canada were connected to some Hamas official that talked about like global solidarity or global uprising or global whatever, right? And so Canadian officials basically tried to state that the Canadian protests were somehow connected, even though it was understood pretty much at the get-go that there was no connection. It was all part of the demonization process. And you kind of you forget this stuff as the time rolls on, and there's just one phase after another. But how that dynamic right at the get-go, there was a setting of the tone that was done by Canadian politicians and, of course, media outlets and Israel lobby groups and whatever. But so the Maple got the internal documents showing how they were basically lying at the time. They knew there was no connection, but they were trying to demonize. Now, I'll get to the Housefather appointment that I guess I'll spend a little bit of time discussing. So on Friday, Anthony Housefather was appointed a special advisor on Jewish community relations and anti-Semitism. Okay. And this is a pretty remarkable affair. Okay. Now, Anthony Housefather has been, obviously, he's an uber Zionist. He's an uber Jewish supremacist. He is, a genocidal maniac. He's been promoting, more. He went solidarity mission. He met with far right, people from Ben Gvir's party. Okay, but that's all pretty straightforward. But he's also been incredibly disloyal to the Liberal Party. He's criticized Trudeau since at least mid-November, when Trudeau said something about Israel killing Palestinian children. He criticized that publicly. He's criticized Canada voting with basically every country in the world for a ceasefire December 12th or 13th or something like that. He criticized that. Canada's voted the UN. He then, after the March 18th thing, and so there was always this story going around that he was threatening to resign if Canada called for a ceasefire before the US did. That was kind of floating around out there, reported on by CBC, but it was never the name. He wasn't mentioned. And then that formalized, right, in March, when the House of Commons passed this very modest lessening of Canada's contribution to the genocide. He openly threatened to resign. He did a whole big kerfuffle, went and he's going to look into what he's going to do. And I think he went a week and something like that. And then he finally reported back that he wasn't going to resign, but he made a huge, big media spectacle. There is almost no other issue or other MP that could be so openly disloyal like that and then get compensated. He got compensated back in January. We became parliamentary secretary. So, I guess the deputy minister, the political leader below the minister, he's deputy or parliamentary secretary to I think it's finance, not finance. I forget which one it is, but I think finance or treasury or something. Um, and so he got compensated for that already, and now he's going to be compensated with this new position to just basically be even more of a platform to be an advocate for Israeli crimes. It's unbelievable. And it's also then unbelievable the level of they already have a special envoy to combat anti-Semitism and promote Holocaust remembrance or whatever the exact title is, right? They already have Deborah Lyons in that. So now Trudeau got a second special envoy on anti-Semitism. So this speaks to just the infrastructure of basically, I don't know, anti-Semitism industry, right? The protect Israel from criticism industry, which has many facets to it. Obviously, Trudeau government adopting the IHRA's anti-Palestinian definition, and Deborah Lyons is in part of a process of elaborating a tool to further implement that. Then you have actually just the University of Ottawa set up a special envoy on anti-Semitism. They appointed that guy, former communications security establishment guy Arthur. He's just a fanatic Zionist, like kill more Palestinian babies, campaigner online. The sort of the whole like infrastructure of this is getting to be just totally stunning, and but it's clearly still successful, right? It's still successful. Now one of the flip sides to the infrastructure, there was a big, much of the media outlets, National Post reported this poll that's claiming that 1/4 of Canadians believe Holocaust is exaggerated. That's the big like pullout quote. And in the story, I didn't actually read the poll, but in the story, they say that about 1/5 said it's overly publicized in media, cinema, and books. So the Nazi Holocaust is over publicized in media, cinema, and books. And they're kind of suggesting that that's I don't know, it's either Holocaust denial or it's anti-Semitic or it's insensitive to Jews, or it's not exactly clear what they're saying by that, but they're saying that means something. Okay. But I agree with that point, right? I don't think the Nazi Holocaust is exaggerated. I think the Nazi Holocaust is the level of horror is beyond comprehension. But is it outplaced? Does it get outsized discussion in our media and books and cinema? Of course it does. It's like way outsized compared to atrocities that are comparable or more pertinent to Canada. So yes, definitely that's the case. But they're framing this as some sort of like, and it's not even close. Like they make a big kerfuffle about how, like, especially among young people, they'll say they do studies and polling this, and like 50% or 30% of young people don't know what the Nazi Holocaust was, which I basically believe. But if you go and ask 16 and 18-year-olds or 14-year-olds or whatever, like what did King Leopold do in the Congo, you'll find that like not even 1% would know that there was like maybe 10 million people killed, right? So I mean, you can ask you can ask young Canadians about innumerable levels of crimes, imperial, colonial, other crimes in history, and they vast majority of them don't know hardly anything about it. And then the other question is that the way in which it's just presumed that this is a particularly important piece of Canadian knowledge is not really unpackaged, right? The Nazi Holocaust is not a particularly important Canadian, right? Canada didn't have that much to do with the Nazi Holocaust, right? So that element to it, and I know that Amira Haas in 6 or 7 years ago, I quoted this in one or two places, the Haaretz journalist, she pointed out that they were setting up a Holocaust monument in Ottawa. At a time, I think there may be subsequent, but I'm not even sure if this is true, there wasn't any monument to the dispossession of First Nations, right? So we're setting up a monument for what the Nazis did in Europe, Germans did in Europe, without a monument in Ottawa or to the horrors of European colonization. So this is part of the whole kind of, so so they, like the house fathers of the world, they use this stuff to beat their stick of we have to do more of this. Anti-Semitism is such a big problem because a quarter of people, in my opinion, correctly say that it's gets outsized influence. This is used to justify further outsized influence of this history. On the note of this question, there was a whole kerfuffle this week about a demonstration that happened in Surrey in the suburbs of Vancouver, where Palestine protesters, there was an Israel softball tournament where an Israel team was playing the Canadian team, I believe, and maybe some other teams, and they had a protest. And they which I totally agree with. I think the Israeli team should not have been allowed to participate. I think it's outrageous that Israeli team would be participating in a Canadian softball tournament right now, amidst what Israel's doing. I think that's straightforward. I don't think there's Russian teams participating, and what Israel's doing is worse than what Russia's doing. So it seems pretty straightforward there. Now, what was interesting about it, so there was a placard that they made a big kerfuffle about that had the Israeli flag and the Nazi symbol, and I think it said different era, same politics. It wasn't exactly that word. Different era, same. I would personally not have made this placard because I feel like generally the sort of the saying Israel and the Zionists are government are Nazis is, I'm not totally keen on that. Whatever, I don't have any problem with it, but that's not my personal. I mean, I do refer to it as a Holocaust. I think it's a big mistake to say that there's only the Holocaust. I think there's multiple Holocausts in history, and we should be really clear about that. And in fact, there's been this appropriation of that. But I'm not. But I think that the placard this person put forward is a totally legitimate placard. Again, I wouldn't have personally structured my critique in that way, but it was nothing, outside of bounds. But a huge kerfuffle, right? All the NDP, David Eby, the premier, condemned it. The leader of the Green Party of BC condemned it. She said, this is Sonia first to know, I am horrified to hear that protesters targeted children and used Nazi imagery at a baseball game in BC last night. We cannot tolerate hate in our province. I mean, there was Israel flags. You could see the images. All these people, the supporters, were all flying Israel flags at the baseball game or the softball game. I mean, sorry, yeah, you're gonna amidst the genocide, you're gonna have protesters. Again, should the exact comparison, is it what I have done? No. Was it legitimate? It certainly wasn't outside of bounds. But we're still at that 9 months in, condemnation for the leader of the Green Party. Same dynamic I've gone on too long here again. Same dynamic with the head of the Human Rights Commissioner, the new Human Rights Commissioner, whole onslaught. It's just going and going and going. CIJA, the Marco Mendicino, the Globe Mail's got the piece. Former public safety minister calls for broad probe of new human rights chief. So Marco Mendicino, who's a Liberal MP, is now basically condemning his government. The Tories pledged to fire human rights chair. The onslaught. Then there's that Levitt, the corporate lawyer, for the employment lawyer column in the National Post. Every single, maybe once or twice over the past, he's a weekly column in the business section of the National Post. Every single, over the past 9 months, I've talked about it many times, there's nothing to do with employment, or very tangentially to do with employment law. It's just basically Zionist, whatever. He's like, human rights commissioner's past disqualifies him from role. So the onslaught continues. A similar dynamic. The journalism collective that's going to be dishing out. It's actually not really dishing out because it's CRA controls it all, but that oversees some of the money that Google is going to be paying to media outlets. It doesn't actually, it's all very bureaucratized. And if you are a media outlet with this many staff, you get this amount of money. So it's not, there's actually not, they don't have control over the money, but they have some they play some role in the sort of distributional elements to it. The CIJA got them to apologize, the head of this group, for anti-Semitic repost. The headline in the National Post: Journalism Collective Director apologizes for anti-Semitic reposts. And all, of course, the repost that she did, it was just reposted stuff about the horrible things Israel's doing in Gaza, about what's going on, all like either absolutely documented fact or highly credible information. That's all that they've done. But they're apologizing now for who knows what exactly they're apologizing, because there's some hurt in the Jewish community or something like that or whatever. But they got it one more time. They've been able to get this dynamic. We've seen this so many times. It's unbelievable. The Globe and Mail published this piece. What does anti-Palestinian racism mean? And it's basically from this guy in Israel, and bemoaning how the Toronto District School Board passed this thing about anti-Palestinian racism. And this is really, really impressive. The column even suggests that part of the reason we shouldn't be adopting this anti-Palestinian racism, because it's vague, there's a certain vagueness to it, whatever, that argument, which has, truths within it, of course. Part of the reason is because we've seen this dynamic happen with claims of anti-Semitism. They're suggesting that because this has happened with, the vague, what is anti-Semitism, much more, probably, or substantially more vague than what anti-Palestinian racism is. He's suggesting that because this dynamic has happened with the employment of anti-Semitism, therefore we shouldn't be adopting anti-Palestinian racism as this sort of category, because it could fall into the same pattern. This is unbelievable. This is somebody who's clearly, a purveyor of this type of employment of anti-Semitism. And then today you had in the Globe and Mail, Geist, I think it's Michael Geist. I used to read him when I worked at this the communication, when I worked at the communications CEP, Communications Energy Paperworkers Union. I had the telecommunications portfolio, and Geist was a big telecommunications guy. He used to have a column in the Toronto Star, maybe. Anyways, he was one of the people that was sort of, you're supposed to kind of read, and I read him a lot on telecommunications stuff. And I've seen him online. He's a serious Zionist. I've seen that. So today he's got a column in the Globe. Jewish concerns are often met with disbelief. Okay, so he's arguing Jewish concerns are often met with disbelief. So they on Wednesday they run, anti-Palestinian racism you shouldn't be trying to adopt anything around that, because it's been, a whole bunch of reasons. But and then they on Monday they publish this guy saying Jewish concerns are often met with disbelief. A couple of days after they appointed Trudeau has his second advisor on anti-Semitism after they adopted the IRGC, after their funding. I mean, it's just like, it's comical, right? It's like the right wing. People said the media is all. I remember this one time I was in Washington, D.C. 20 years ago, reading the Washington Times. And there was like 2 or 3 comments on this one op-ed page that was all about how the media, it was, left wing. And I'm like, how could it be possible that you have all these columns in your paper about the media being left wing? Like it's proving that it's not. You're having all the columns and saying it's, and the same dynamic. So like Jewish concerns are often met with disbelief on the front page of the Globe and Mail, right? Like, give me a break. It's just a comedy. And this guy, they have to see this, but this doesn't, it doesn't stop. Now, Robin Urbach, who has a piece in Saturday's Globe and Mail columnist. She says U of T encampment ends not with a bang or whimper, but with a shrug. And she's, she's serious Zionist, a little bit sophisticated, tries to pretend to be a little bit sophisticated with it. At the end of her column, she says, she's sort of saying, well, maybe they were doing some, maybe they were right, maybe they're on the right side of history, maybe they kind of, bad things have happened in Gaza, maybe whatever, kind of just two sides, a little bit of this stuff. She says, but not every rebellion comes at the perceived safety of an already marginalized group. Okay, the perceived safety. She's smart enough to put in perceived, not that there was any danger to Jews in Toronto. Okay, perceived. Okay, well, perceived is a tricky word there, you know? But then she puts in marginalized group. I mean, this is a joke. The Toronto Jewish community is if you go by any socioeconomic indicator, they're the best off group in Toronto. I mean, that's just the reality of it. But it's a marginalized group. I mean, the Jewish Torontonian is more likely to own a house, have a university degree, be on a corporate board, be a billionaire than any other group in the city. So if that's a marginalized group, there is one category that the Jewish community is on the wrong side of, which is hate crimes, and it's clear they are, and by a significant margin. But not on the other sociological indicators that we use for all other, you know, higher infant mortality, death rates, incarceration, on and on and on. All the other indicators, take the 20 indicators we use to define, you know, lack of positions on corporate boards, income levels, on and on and on. So it's just, but this is somebody who's, you know, she'll write this in the Globe Mail and there'll be no response to it, because to respond to it, of course, would be anti-Semitic. To look at statistics is anti-Semitic on that. That's how everyone would respond to, you know, all the Globe Mail would never publish something, you know, responding to that, but everyone online, So, I wanted to talk about that. Now, on the, I've gone on way too long here. On the camps, multiple developments. Obviously, they shut down in Toronto. I thought that seems like what the students did there was I think it's a decent play. I wasn't part of the discussions, but they took it down themselves. It was kind of an interesting play. I think it makes sense in many different contexts. The ruling from the judge was actually not that bad. It gave the property rights, but it gave the students most of the rest. It gave the university the property rights. They have the right to take it down, but the students, you know, sort of legitimate cause, here in Montreal, they went at the encampment on the pension plan that was in downtown Montreal. The cops came in at 5 in the morning, took it all down. Now I did want to, so I go down there. Okay, so they take it down at 5 a.m. I go down there 5 hours later. I get down there at 10 o'clock. And it's all taken down. There's like cops everywhere. The Sûreté de Québec is there. So that's outside of Montreal. Police are brought in, right? So the camp's already been totally cleared by the time I get down. But there's still like cops and horses and riot squad and probably hundreds still around. So I'm just kind of like milling about, and there's all the media there. They're doing their lives and this and that. And I hear the TVA reporter say that the Valérie Plante, the mayor of Montreal, is going to have a press conference to discuss this at 11:15. So like just after a little more than an hour. And at the Hôtel de Ville, the city hall, which is like 6 or 7 blocks away from where the encampment was. And so I decided I'm going to go over to the Hôtel de Ville, and I was going to go over to just actually hope to see just on the chance the mayor might be like walking into City Hall. Like, so I was kind of like milling about. There's cops everywhere at City Hall. I go there, you know, like 10:30, like very early. Cops everywhere, and so I'm sure the cops have recognized me downtown, or you know, at where the encampment was, and I assume they've recognized me around the City Hall. But I'm just kind of milling about. And the City Hall, I've been kicked out of the City Hall not long ago, so I'm like basically certain I'm not getting into City. All the Valérie Plante people recognize me, okay, or I think they all do. So I'm like, there's no way I'm getting inside, and I wasn't planning on getting inside because it's a serious security check, whatever. But then I milling about. They've changed the city. It was under construction. It was it's a new building. So it's like anyway, that kind of realizes at the time. And so I see these. I've been there 15, 20 minutes looking around, and I see these two like camera crews about to go in to the building. So I follow them, and so one of the things I was planning on doing is actually just talking to the reporters going in to say, hey, you should ask about because the public security minister of Quebec called for basically the encampment to be shut down, which is, you know, he didn't say the police have to shut it down, but he basically criticized the city. So, you can argue that he was intervening in like police affairs, right? Which is a pretty big no-no. That's not how it's supposed to work. It's certainly not the provincial government that's directing the Montreal police, right? And so I'm basically I was making the argument that like that's a much bigger violation than any like municipal bylaw that the encampment may have violated by having some tents up and whatnot. Anyway, so I was going to talk to that, bring that up to the media people to ask that question of the mayor and have her try to denounce it. Anyways, I go up to these media people going in, and I always talk you. I try to. They're going through the security check, so I start talking to them. You want to always associate yourself with them. So I'm like, hey, I'll give it a go. Maybe I'll get kicked out from the security check, but I'll give it a go. I'll try to get through the security check. I'm assuming I'm not going to get in. I chat to them. I sort of act like I'm kind of like part of the media crew that's trying to get through security. The security check takes forever. It's like worse than an airport. Got to take your bag out, taking my laptop out. They see something in my bag. The whole thing goes on for like 10 minutes. I get through the security check. Then they say to me, the woman says to me, "Are you a journalist?" or like something to that effect. But I've been there for like 10 minutes, so it's like kind of rude for her now to like ask this question. And I just kind of say, "Yeah, I'm a journalist." Da da da. And she's just kind of like not really sure. Anyways, I just move on. Okay. So then I'm like walking into the press conference room, and I'm like, okay, I'm sure someone in Valley Ponce people are gonna see me as I go into the press conference room, try to keep my head down, kind of walk in. I get in there and I'm like 25, 30 minutes before the press conference. I'm like, okay, I've now gotten in the room. I go to the furthest end of the room. I sit down in a seat that's towards the window, turn my head, pull my laptop out, and just start looking in the other direction, hoping that no one's going to recognize me, whatever. I'm there for like 25, 30 minutes. Finally, the at 11:16, 11:17, security comes over to me and says to me, oh no, do I not have this? They say to me, I'm going to try to get this video if I can actually do this here. Yeah. So they say to me, why am I not seeing this? Okay, well, maybe I'll just play it out then. Maybe you can hear it.
Sur mon site web. Okay? No. 15,000 Palestinian children killed. 20, according to Save the Children, 20,000 more that are missing under the rubble, lost from their family, killed under the rubble, right? Stolen from Israel. Israel put in jails. No, the mayor can answer that question. This question is completely relevant to this affair.
C'est une invitation de média.
Oui, et moi je suis média et je suis ici et je reste.
C'est pas un média.
Ben, certainement, je suis média. Va sur mon site web.
So sorry, you can see it on Twitter if you want, but basically security comes up to me after like I'm in there for half an hour, just as the press conference is about to start, and says I have to leave. And they say that they won't start the press conference until I leave. So I just sit there. I start speaking about what I was going to ask the mayor, which is about the 15,000 Palestinian children killed, plus Save the Children say more than 20,000 more Palestinian children. And then I make the argument about the interference by the public safety minister. And I just start, all the media in the room turns to me and is like filming this, right? And it just goes on, and I just keep going. I do it in English, I do it in French, and I just going back and forth. And the security guys don't want it. They don't want to arrest me in front of all the media, right? It's just like a very bad kind of optic. But the mayor is saying the press conference won't happen. So then they go live. They actually go live to the TVA, who was supposed to go live to the press conference. Now the press conference is being postponed. They go live to me, like asking my question of the mayor of this 15,000 people killed. And so I got a 3-minute clip on the LCN, on the equivalent to CBC News World, of talking about my question to the mayor about the killing in Gaza and whatever. And then finally, after about 15 minutes, I don't really want to get arrested, and I finally do just get up and leave. But I was able to basically get in a whole bunch of the media referred to it in stories. I was able to get across a pretty good disruption. I was very, very surprised and happy by this disruption. On the note of the activism, there's this. Okay, so now later that night, after the dismantling of the camp, I do want to point this out. There was a protest at 8 p.m. emergency demo, about 300 people. I went to this. I guess it was Friday night. I took Joshua and Zuri, so I had the kids, and I had a feeling of like a bit heavier because the cops had come in the encampment and whatnot. Later on, Montreal police did brutalize people at McGill, and a woman actually had her ankle busted apparently by the cops, and spent like 20 hours in in hospital. So the Montreal police, they're very interested to see their dynamics about the McGill encampment, but they have, turning back to their kind of brutal kind of methods, which has been what they usually are with activists. But the protest, like I said, 300 people later in the day on emergency. The next day, Saturday and Sunday, there were demonstrations again. Actually, on Friday, on Thursday, there was a demonstration in front of the Quebec Pension Office, about 100 people. Later on in the evening, the Trudeau and Melanie Joly had a fundraiser, last minute protest, 150 people there. So the mobilizations still continue. I know it's similar dynamics in other cities. A few other pieces on the opposition. There's the push in Sudbury to ban nickel sales to Israel. That's an interesting one. There also the Giller Prize, the literary prize, big kerfuffle. The playing itself out in the Globe and Mail about because the Scotiabank sponsors the prize. And there was a really good protest back in November, maybe December, when they gave the prize and they got into the room and they interrupted the big event. And that the Giller Prize has just been racked with internal debate and controversy. And so that's still playing itself out, which is totally because of the activists. Also, St. John's Pride has pro-Palestine advocacy group as grand marshals for the annual parade, which I think is coming up in coming days. So the mobilizations continue. There's the resistance still continues, which is amazing. And I've gone on way too long. I think I'll leave it at that. And if people have comments or questions, go ahead. I'll make Laura a co-host and go ahead, Yuri. So I think I just muted you and then unmuted you. Yeah, go ahead.
Nadia first, because I have more than one question. So Nadia first, please.
Go ahead, Nadia.
Okay, thank you, Eve. I have one comment and one question. My comment first, why don't all these people who are here, some 67 people, write a letter to the Prime Minister complaining about the appointment of Housefather as an indication of interference by a foreign state into the affairs of the Canadian Parliament? Why don't each one of us write a letter, handwritten or even written on a machine and sent by post to Parliament? The other question that I have is, why is it that Finland, and I think it's Sweden, applied to become members of NATO? I don't understand.
Well, they applied to be members of NATO in the context of Russia's invasion, which strengthened the hand of those forces, the pro-NATO forces in those countries to join. With regards to which I think was a big error. I mean, I think it's, as I read out the New York Times admission that the U.S. intelligence is very clear that they don't think Putin has any desire to, any fighting outside of Ukraine. So it makes no sense for Sweden and Finland to make that move. But that's that's what happened. I mean, those countries, I think that they already had fairly close relations to NATO. So they now they're formally in. I just saw, Finland's inviting in a whole bunch of U.S. bases. I saw some story about that. I don't know exactly the mechanics of what that means, but yeah, they you know, it's the U.S. is of course using that to further militarize, and Russia's responding by we're gonna, you know, put more troops on our border with Finland and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's a negative spiral.
Do they have conservative governments?
I don't know enough about the governments in place there right now. I know that there's been sort of right-wing forces in those countries that have been pushing for NATO for a long time, but the majority kind of public opinion was against. But I think that those sort of shifted, that dynamic shifted amidst the the sort of Russian invasion. And you got to remember that, you know, NATO propaganda is powerful, right? And so all we hear about is the Russian belligerence, right? You know, I'm sure the vast majority of people in Sweden and Finland are not hearing in their media much about the role that NATO played in provoking and 2014 coup, and, you know, all the context that American breaking up of the nuclear arms accords, and, you know, all that kind of dynamic. But yeah.
Okay, so you just let you know, we've got 4 more people who have questions, so I'm just going to ask everyone to be as succinct as you can in posing your questions. So go ahead, Yuri.
Yeah, actually, this very interesting thing about Finland. Finland had a war of independence with the Soviet Union, which we should definitely do a deep dive in, and they've long kind of like weaponized that to, you know, support NATO, and but yeah, but at the moment they both have very far right governments, and just, you know, NATO socialists. Anywho, Eve, regardless of how small the people of conscience in Israel are, you know, those who subscribe to anti-Zionism and want a democratic, secular, one-state solution, do you see hope in the mass protests against the ruling far-right coalition led by Likud, and them demanding an end to the war and just wanting the hostages to come home soon? And then I wanted to ask you, any veterans of Canadian wars that have organizations like in the US, where they have these veterans-led organizations that mobilize against warfare, and I was curious if there are strong economic incentives to join the army in Canada. And I was wondering if you could talk more about the Palestine justice groups that have blocked pride marches, because the corporate media and the state media has depicted this as Palestine justice groups being disrespectful to us LGBTQIA plus community, when that's not the case. Actually, many queer leftists of all backgrounds actually support, you know, what the Palestine justice groups are doing, and not having, you know, them engaging in pink washing, like when Black Lives Matter was protesting against the police being involved in Pride. And Stefan was asking in the chat if Afghanistan wasn't that arguably a justified NATO response, given bin Laden had attacked the United States, so therefore members of NATO can attack Afghanistan, which the U.S. accused, you know, the Taliban of harboring, and wasn't there some truth to the Canadian Peace Congress being a communist group?
Well, I think it's true. There's some truth that the Canadian Peace Congress is yeah, I think that's true. I don't think that's the Communist Party is like the central player in the Peace Congress, and has been for a long time. You know, I don't know enough about all the specific history but yeah. I mean, I think that the Taliban did at one point offer up bin Laden if the Americans provided the like evidence or documentation about his role in, you know, blowing up the Twin Towers or whatnot. I think the Americans also invaded, and then I don't remember all the details, but they invade, and Canada Canadian Special Forces, you know, special forces from all the countries, and then the NATO mission comes afterwards. So, like, to argue that you know, there was sort of, I mean, you know, Afghanistan didn't invade, like, you know, no, I don't think anyone's claiming that the Taliban government was responsible for 9/11 in the US. The question would be, did they, you know, the argument could be that they didn't do enough to disrupt, you know, an organization that then did it, but that, right? So, but yeah, I don't think that really fits with the NATO defensive dynamic. The pride question, I mean, I don't know enough about, you know, about what happened. I know in Toronto there was some action that was taken at the pride, and you know, queer pro-Palestinian kind of activists you know, blocked it and made some demands of pride. And there's been big battle with pride in Toronto for like months. I haven't followed that closely. Gary Kinsman, an activist in Toronto who I know was, you know, a major player in that. The push. I haven't followed all the ins and outs of what was exactly being demanded of Pride. But yeah, I don't remember the other ones, but
Okay, Hans, go ahead.
Eve, we're going to need more than an hour now. There's so many things happening. But would you mind if I go back to the NATO thing? The Gaza and Israel thing is going to be here for a long time, but the NATO anniversary is peaking on this weekend. Unfortunately, the only people in the left that are doing something about it is the Hamilton coalition to stop the war. But I agree with you entirely that the die was cast for the Cold War, and NATO was the icing on the cake. And can I pull my little German rank? Germany, again, after the Second World War, was the key to whether or not socialism would make any headway. We all know in 1923, the ultra-leftism of the Communist Party flubbed it. But in 1945, 6, and 7, it was the lethargy of Stalinism and its degeneration of socialism that many returning communists from Moscow exile told horror stories about the persecutions of them in the Gulag, where many of them were dead. So that in the elections that were held in what was now called the Buy Zone in 1947, stop me if I'm going on too long, because I'd like to enlarge on this at some point, even next week if necessary. The Buy Zone was the Western nations consolidating and eventually bringing in a Western currency to enforce the Marshall Plan, which Secretary of State George Marshall had held out as the sugar candy.
Allez sur mon site web. Okay? No. 15,000 Palestinian children killed.
Eve, you're
yeah, sorry.
yeah, sorry.
Do you want me to continue next week, Eve?
No, continue.
Anyway, in 1947, the CIA hired Klaus Barbie, the top or one of the leading SS security guys in Memmingen near Munich, Augsburg actually, and he rewarded them for hiring him by discovering that Russia was mining uranium in East Germany, in Thuringen. And that was a signal for the Americans, a wake-up call that the Russians also had a nuclear bomb. But at the negotiations about the spoils of war, Stalin was interested in the reparation capability of Germany. In other words, to help rebuild the devastated Russian economy. But the fortunes of the KPD, the Communist Party, were encouraging the West to say, we can win this. And in the ensuing 2 years between 47 and 49, they consolidated. They won the blockade of Berlin. The definitive book that I have read on this is Drawing the Line, the American decision to divide Germany, 1944 to 1949, Caroline Eisenberg. Let's recall, 1949 was the founding of NATO. And this week, of course, Biden's decade-old provocation of post-war Moscow is reaching its high point, and all the vassal puppets are being lined up in Washington, only to hear the weakened voice of his master's voice, Biden, who, in order to maintain the faith of his stooges, is swearing never to resign, although the handwriting is on the wall. Okay? Next week, I hope we will discuss the results of the French election, because here I will declare publicly that I'm breaking with the Trotskyist catechism on Popular Front. This Nouvelle Popular Front upset the fascist trend, and I regard that as a very vindication of maybe we shouldn't always poo-poo a Popular Front.
Yeah, I think what's happened in the French election seems like a good thing. I haven't followed that closely, but it seems like quite a good thing. You know, Mélenchon has been anti-NATO. Last night he talked about the genocide in Gaza and said that, you know, France should immediately recognize Palestine. You know, I don't know enough about, like, you know, that close following about, you know, all the different policies, but it seems like definitely much better than you know, a Jagmeet Singh or anything like that. So that's you know, that's, I think, a very good thing. And I mean, I think that that history that you're referencing around post World War II is really, you know, the Americans considered it very important to ensure that, and that's what the Marshall Plan was, is to ensure that the Western European countries didn't go in the wrong direction. You know, that capitalist order was sort of reintroduced, and the elite structures were reintroduced, and that's part of what NATO was about at its starting point. And that's the whole Operation Gladio, right? And the stay behind and all that kind of stuff that doesn't get talked about much about you know, another side to NATO. But
Okay, Ellen, go ahead.
I just like to clarify this thing about Finland and Russia. I happen to have family in Finland, and in some years ago, I did visit a place called Tampere, Finland, in which there's a museum called the Lenin Museum, in which Lenin gave Finland its independence, because Finland had originally been a colony of Sweden, but lost it to Tsarist Russia in some war. So they came under the Russian Tsar, but Lenin did give them, when they applied for independence after the revolution in Russia, Lenin gave them their independence. Myself, if I want to go to my great-grandfather's farm, I have to get a visa to go to Russia, because when Hitler invaded Poland, then Stalin got really nervous about the border with Finland being only some 18 kilometers away. So he began to negotiate with the right-wing government of Finland of the time, and but in order to obtain a buffer zone, a chunk of land that was actually Finnish Karelia. Anyways, the negotiations went no place. And then finally, Stalin, the way I understand the story, sent some soldiers and fired on a town in Russian Karelia, and then commenced an invasion of Karelia. That's not unknown throughout the political world of wars. So they then, of course, they did take take a chunk of Finland at that time, which when the Germans invaded the German siege of Leningrad occurred, then of course the Finns took that back, but this went back and forth, and Hitler wanted the Finns to move and be involved in the siege of Leningrad, but the leader of Finland said no way. They only went up to where the border had been, and they stopped. Yeah, but I wanted to mention that if anyone gets a chance to go to the Sicilienhof Palace in Germany, I've forgotten the name of the city. There is where the negotiations at the end of the Second World War occurred and ended on July 31st. And Harry Truman, who was the president of the United States, was so frustrated with the negotiations because he couldn't get Stalin to see, quote unquote, the right way of divvying up Eastern Europe. So he had already informed Churchill and the other allies of the West that the Americans had the atomic bomb, and then he very subtly did somehow make mention to Stalin about this. But of course, the negotiations ended on 31st of July, and then to make his point clear to Stalin, he bombed Hiroshima on the 6th and then Nagasaki on the 8th of August. In other words, pointing out to him, look out, you might be next. A lot more.
Okay, thank you, Alan. I think we're going to have to head over to Corrine now. It's getting a bit late. Corrine?
Yes, I'm not quite sure why we are labeling organizations as communist. It was a document of the Canadian Peace Congress that called in the police with 4 vehicles and one paddy, of which was one paddy wagon. I had to face 7 police officers because I had a table with the document from the Canadian Peace Congress on Gaza. And it was at the Westridge Wolf Willow Community Center at a Peace and Unity Festival. I was asked to staff this table. I had no idea that this would be happening. It was supposed to be a family-friendly event with.
Can you back up a bit? What are we referring to exactly?
I was asked to take my table down because of this document, and if I didn't take it down, the whole event would be closed. I was invited to come. I wasn't imposing anything on anyone.
I don't know. I don't. About what city? What? Just can you give us
Edmonton, Alberta.
In Edmonton, Alberta.
Okay, what happened exactly?
Well, because of this document from the Canadian Peace Congress on Gaza, I was asked to take the table down by the police. I was never given an official reason why. I am still searching for that. We are trying to write letters.
Where was it at what event exactly?
It was called the Peace and Unity Festival, and it was sponsored by Migrante, John Humphrey Center for Peace and Human Rights, Memoria Viva, Society of Edmonton.
Okay, I heard about okay.
And this table, they sponsored a Peace and Unity Festival. It was supposed to be family friendly. We had cultural events planned. It was supposed to be from 11 in the morning to 11 at night. And because of one document that I had on this table, I was told that if I did not take this table down, the whole event would be closed.
Because somebody called the
After
police.
that, another table with Palestinian paraphernalia. They had no literature, but only caps and scarves that said Palestine and flags for sale, was asked to close down. The next table was the Young Communist League table next to me. After that, other people said they would not continue. And finally, they closed the event down in unity. But wow. I don't think we should be labeling an organization in this manner. I don't know. I don't understand that entirely, because that's where the document was, and it was nothing but the same thing everyone is saying about Gaza.
No, I don't think anyone here at least is well, I don't know, maybe you can ask Yuri that, but I don't think anyone was trying to like, I don't know, besmirch the Canadian Peace Congress because it's connected to the Communist Party. I think it was just a sort of somewhat of a statement of fact. And I certainly wasn't in reference to the police intervention that you're referring to, or I didn't take that from what Yuri was asking. At least I'd heard about what you're referring to. I think I heard about that on Twitter, and I think I saw that IJV Edmonton sent a statement criticizing maybe the organization that offered the land, or wherever the
Community leagues, the community.
community. Okay, yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, I just read that statement.
Yeah. But
Okay.
okay.
So,
Sorry to
okay.
hear that. Sorry that.
Yeah. Yeah, brutal. Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone. And thanks, Eve. I think it's time to end. There are no more questions. Thanks all.
Take care, everyone. Thanks.
Bye.